All right. Hello, folks, and welcome to this tropical season short summary. We are going to be looking at one of the many back to back seasons in the 80s, the 1983 East Central Pacific hurricane season, which can also just be shortened to the 1983 Pacific hurricane season, as that narrows it down to where you're talking about. Typhoons aren't in the west or in the south. So, our season here is really active, looking at the amount of tracks we had, and also, of course, looking at our chronology here. A very, very active season, which is really surprising to see just how many days we had with a tropical system. So, well above average is what I'm saying, with 21 storms, 12 hurricanes, and 8 major hurricanes. This season beats out the 2005 and 2020 Atlantic hurricane seasons for the number of major hurricanes, with them only reaching 7. So this one reaching 8. It's just one more, but that is, you know, it's just one more. This would lead to a seasonal ace of 206.2, which is one of the highest. In fact, it is in the top 10 of seasonal aces for the Pacific hurricane season. This season would see the deaths, unfortunately, of 168 people, and in 1983, $303.33 million in damage is recorded to have been done in total. It's a lot of threes. It's funny because it's a lot of threes. But anyway, we're going to start off with Hurricane Adolf. Not spelled uh, not spelled in the bad guy way. It's with a PH, not the other way. This storm formed on the 21st of May as a depression, of course, at only 7.1 degrees north. This is actually pretty notable because this was at the time. Sorry, I just hit my mic. I don't know if you heard it, so I'm just saying sorry. At the time, this was the lowest forming storm, or the lowest latitude or longitude, I don't know, that a storm had formed in the Pacific, in the East and Central Pacific. This would actually be beaten out by Velma of the same year, which formed at just 7 degrees north, so just 7.0, which, albeit not by much, still beat Adolf's record. So there's that, which I found kind of funny. The the depression would become a tropical storm that day and then became a hurricane on the 24th. Now, this also caused Adolf to be the earliest forming hurricane in the East Pacific Basin. However, in 2001, a a storm also named Adolf, the exact same spelling, would beat this Adolf for the title of the earliest forming hurricane. So, some inception going on right here. Adolf would peak on the 24th of May, reaching 110 miles per hour at an unknown pressure. So, the exact same issues that I've been having for a while now with the East Central Pacific seasons have not been able to find pressures. It's not necessary, but still kind of good to know. This would cause Adolf to become May's strongest hurricane, which would be beaten out sometime later. If I'm not mistaken, I forget by what storm, unfortunately. However, we see here after becoming a Category 2 that we see a sharp turn. This was due to a high pressure that was actually over in the Gulf of Tetuanapek, so over to its right-hand side on the map here, which you would expect it to be the other way around, but this high pressure actually pulled it inwards. Something that is weird because high pressures just push air out on the ground compared to pulling air up, as what a low pressure does. Anyways, the storm would also then begin to weaken due to shear, of course. Hurricanes, tropical systems hate shear. That's one of their worst things ever. And then Adolf would make landfall near Porto Vallarta on the 26th as a tropical storm, and also make landfall near Mazatlan. I do hope I pronounced that right. I apologize if I didn't. On the same day, so the 26th as well, also as a tropical storm. Now, due to the already weakened state of Adolf, it does make sense in this case that Adolf abruptly ended upon reaching the mountainous interior of Mexico, so Adolf dissipated on the 28th. There are no known deaths or casualties for that matter, or even major damage done by Adolf, which is a pleasant surprise as it was expected to not be at such a low intensity upon landfall. And this storm, Adolf, would actually become only one of two systems to strike the Mexican West Coast this season, the other being Tico, which we will definitely talk about. And I may actually just make Tico into its own video, but we'll see. Lastly, and strangely enough, the remnants of Adolf would be brought over to the east, where it actually brought some pretty heavy showers to Florida, where Floridian headlines called Adolf also a early start to the season for the not for the Atlantic, but for the Pacific, which isn't correct because even then the season started on the 15th of May, so in season. Anyway, Hurricane Gill. Wow, look at that track, so long. Hurricane Gill formed as TD7 on the 7th of July, was upgraded to a tropical storm at 0 UTC the 24th, and was upgraded to a hurricane at 0 UTC the 26th. Now, personally, this is just me. I do not believe that Gill became a tropical storm or a hurricane at either of these times. That is way too awfully convenient. The source that I'll have in the description even says that Gill formed at 0 UTC the 23rd, which I'm just saying that it's way too convenient for all three times to be 0 united coordinated time. That's a little bit of a stretch. Now, if two of the times were sure, but definitely not all three. Anyway, that's just my nitpick. What you also do know is that Gill would peak around 24 hours later, so yes, again, around 0 UTC, reach 90 miles per hour, this time on the 27th. Now, Gill was then weakened by cooler waters out as it is out in the middle of the Pacific, and fluctuated between depression and then became a tropical storm again until it struck Hawaii, which it was the first to do so since Iowa. So, granted, not too big of a gap here compared to other storms that have had a major gap between between striking Hawaii. Hawaii usually has pretty big breaks in between when it's affected. However, Gill would dissipate on the 5th of August after encountering unsustainable conditions, causing one death and quote-unquote minimal damage. Now, I suspect there was more than that, however, I could not find details on it, and that quote is from Wikipedia. So, there's that. Octave. Oh boy, Octave is a very interesting storm, the same way Hillary is going to be for 2023. This system, Octave, formed on the 27th of September, then becoming a tropical storm at, wouldn't you guess, 0 UTC the 28th. Wow, look at that. Octave would reach its peak of 50 miles per hour approximately only 6 hours later, where it would keep this intensity for a little bit before being weakened by both cooler waters and shear, both things that hurricanes say no to quite vigorously, before dissipating on just the 2nd of October. Note that Octave, as you can see in our rain map here, apologies if it is a little small, it's one of the only places I could fit it on here. uh, was pretty extensive. Also note that Arizona had already experienced a pretty wet winter and before that monsoon, kind of them going on at the same time because, you know, seasons. But I digress. There was still pretty wet already in Arizona, so bringing this hard rain was a lot. In fact, much of the state saw, much of the heavier populated areas of the state, I'll say, saw more than 6 inches of rain within 2 days, which is, for most places, around the yearly total or close to that. So, no matter where you are, if you experience a month's or especially a year's worth of rain in just a few days, you are not going to be doing so hot because there's a lot of water. The Santa Cruz, Relito, and Gila, not Gila, Gila rivers all saw record crests because of Octave, where because of them flooding, possibly flooding their banks, and numerous other inlet rivers flooding their banks, 3,000 buildings were destroyed, and many of them being homes, with another 2,052 being damaged. Octave is responsible for 14 deaths, nearly 1,000 people injured, and $513 million in damage. Note that is indeed 1983 US dollars in damage, just like the 303 million is. There we are. There's Tico. Tico was not a good. Tico was not good. Bad girl. Tico formed on the on the 11th of October, after being monitored for some time, being named TD 21, most likely TD 21E for East, although probably not. Tico had actually been all the way in Africa for so well before this, going into the Atlantic and then finally forming in the Pacific. So had already a very extensive track, although Tico was still just a tropical wave at that point, not officially forming. Jumping forward, Tico becomes a tropical storm by the 13th of October with a 22-kilometer wide eye wall. I state this because that is pretty large for such a lesser intensity storm per se. It also should be said that that the eye of Tico at this point was also fairly wide and also not fully closed, which could possibly explain the very wide eye wall as well. Usually eye walls are just a little bit smaller, especially in especially tropical storms, I'll say. Tico would become a hurricane on the 14th, almost to the 24th, the 14th, turning west due to yet another high pressure. This time, this high pressure was much more intense in pushing Tico back out to sea, unlike the very first one, still over the Gulf of Tehuantepec. This time, instead of pulling it in, Tico was pushed outwards and kind of just went straight north. However, by the 16th, Tico would continue to strengthen. Tico officially peaks on the 19th, reaching anywhere from 130 to 135 miles per hour. I saw most sources did list 130. However, I did see one or two also list 135. So I'm going to put both of them in there. So I am right both ways. Ha ha ha. Anyway, Tico made landfall near Mazatlan around the same day at wind speeds of 125 miles per hour. This made Tico one of the very few major hurricanes to make landfall and one of the strongest landfalling storms in Pacific history, in the East Pacific history. Tico would, as we can see from our rain track, even though there's not too much contrast, I apologize, I'll follow it with my little arrow the best I can. It dissipated over Ohio. Please, for the love of God, I did not need Ohio jokes. Tico was surprisingly reported by several ships throughout its lifetime, in which all of them provided some pretty crucial information and is why we have such a detailed track, especially when Tico was a nearly a major hurricane. Tico would become the worst storm of the season, causing 141 deaths and $284 million worth of damage, with surprisingly Oklahoma seeing the worst of the rainfall at the maximum being in Chickasha, Oklahoma, 16.95 inches, which converted is at least above 406 millimeters, because 406 millimeters is 16 inches. So it's at least more than that. I am very smart and cannot remember measurements to save my life. Hurricane Winnie! Look at Hurricane Winnie, so small. Wait a minute. Is it really? Trust me, Winnie was truly a hurricane. It's just not shown there. The displacement of the intertropical, sorry, of the intertropical convergence zone. That's what it is. I'm so sorry, folks. I had to remember what it stood for. Allowed the development of Winnie on the 4th of December. Essentially, where Winnie is is almost where the ITCZ would be normally. It was displaced further to the north, however, which is why Winnie would actually not make landfall in Mexico. Winnie would be upgraded to a tropical storm, getting the name of Winnie, of course, only 6 hours later, and then would peak on the 6th of December, reaching 90 miles per hour, however, weakening. I'm sorry, I just hit my mic again. However, weakening back down to tropical storm status just that night, and then early on the 7th had dissipated due to unfavorable conditions. It was originally forecasted that Winnie would continue north and even continue to strengthen. However, again, possibly due to the northward displacement of the ITCZ, that Winnie did simply not do so. Winnie just fizzled out and stalled. Winnie would indeed, though, bring some winds and rains northwards, however, barely any, and to a much lesser extent than expected. Winnie is the only known December tropical system officially recorded since 1947, which is very surprising, especially considering the East Pacific is technically the second most active in the world. Note also that Winnie is, to date, the latest tropical system to form in the Northeast Pacific, and that the 1983 season was at the time the longest season, going from May 21st to the 7th of December. That is 201 days. That's a long time. This is the 6th highest seasonal ice in East Pacific history, and given that this is 1983, was influenced by, well, the 1982-1983 El Nino. Very surprising, I know. Note that this season is tied with 1984 for being the 4th most active East Pacific season on record. And yes, the 1984 and then 1985 seasons for the Pacific hurricane seasons will be covered. I just need to get to those. Given I'm recording this just a day before I start school again, so videos will be coming out at a slower rate, and I do not know when I will be publishing this. Probably not too soon after. So, but anyways, I thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you learned something just as I did while researching for this video. Now, I'll see you all in the next one. Again, thank you all so much for watching.